This season of Design Tangents is presented by Genesis. You can learn more about the brand and their vehicles at genesis.com.
My name's Matthew Deere. There's so many different ways you can get into what I do. And every time I meet somebody or hear somebody, I wonder what avenue they took to find me. Because I DJ all around the world. But I've been at places. I played in Berlin. A girl came up to me after my DJ set that was the worst DJ set I've ever heard in my life. You didn't play any of the songs that you made. And I was thinking, oh, don't play that, Matthew Deere, when I'm in a nightclub.
Welcome to Design Tangents, a podcast that goes behind the scenes with creative changemakers to learn about their work, inspiration, challenges, and philosophies.
I'm Josh Rubin.
I'm Evan Ornston.
We're the founders of Cool Hunting.
We launched our first podcast in 2005. Now, that was a video podcast, and it ran for 15 years or so.
One of our first episodes was with Matthew Deere, visiting him in Michigan and learning about how he thinks about and makes music. So it just felt appropriate for this debut season of Design Tangents to revisit Matthew.
He's a composer, a musician, a DJ, a fine artist. We went back to our roots and sat down with Matthew at his house in Michigan.
We're excited for you to hear this episode.
We're also really excited that Matthew created the music for our podcast.
I'm so excited for this conversation because to me, it's like a poetic little bridge from our very first podcast.
I don't remember exactly when we met, but we met, I think, before we did our video with you back in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that episode. It was really great. We actually filmed that, or part of it. You were fishing in it.
Yeah.
And it's quite near where we are today.
Yes, 100%. There was a dam, Barton Dam. And I was going there on my own. I was delivering pizza, I think shortly before that. That's after I quit my last day job. But during that time delivering pizzas and driving around Ann Arbor, I got to know a lot of the kind of nooks and crannies of the town. And there was a little off-road that went to Barton Dam, and I'd go back there and I'd fish every now and then. Because I grew up in Texas fishing with my father. He was kind of a commercial fisherman where you catch fish and sell them to restaurants and all that. So I grew up doing that in Texas. So fishing was always very much a part of my life as a way to, kill the time. Like my dad would be driving down the street or down the highway to do something in Texas, and we'd always have fishing equipment in the back of the truck or Suburban or whatever. And this looks like a great spot. We'll just pull off here and throw some lures in the Guadalupe River for a little bit. So I always had that mentality. And I think when you guys were going by and like looking for stuff to film, it's like, hey, let's go fishing. I've got some stuff still. And we stopped by a really cool, what they call mini marts here, which are basically party stores. We call them party stores, but you guys call them bodegas, more in New York. And we stopped by there and got some worms there, and we went fishing for a bit. And I didn't catch anything. I remember that. A tiny little fish.
This is very fresh for us because we just watched that a couple times this week. And when we made that video, you were well known to some people. Yeah. You'd already kind of co-founded a record label.
Yeah, I've been with Sam from the beginning.
At Ghostly.
At Ghostly International, also from Ann Arbor here.
You met in college.
We did, yeah. Sam's an incredible individual, Sam Valenti, the fourth, for those listening. He saw me performing live at a house party. I knew some of the guys there, and I had coerced them into letting me set up all my electronic equipment in the basement of this top 40 party that they would have upstairs. And here I was with, I think, a keyboard and a sampler and my own PA. And of the 5 or 10 people that came through the basement that night, Sam was one of them. He saw what I was doing and was like, wow, didn't expect to see a guy making live techno here. And he introduced himself and said, hey, I really dig what you do. I want to start a label. And we went and had coffee the next week. He gave me his dorm room number. And for lack of a better, phrase, the rest was history. The label is Sam Valenti, and I was the founding artist. And I really lucked out. Had I not met him, I took a meeting with Carl Craig at Planet E, about 6 months before that, just on a whim. Somebody I knew him and got me a meeting in Detroit. And I love to tell Carl the story. I don't know if he ever remembers it, even when I talk to him. Because Carl's just awesome like that. But he gave me he ended up hearing some of my tapes and gave me a stack of all the Planet E CDs. There's like Moody Man, Recluse, a few other people. And he just said, hey, like, basically go do your homework. You know, like, you're not quite ready. Like, take these, listen to it, and then come back. And that was 6 months before I met Sam. So I was out there. I was trying to get myself out there. I realized that I had this urge to release music. But meeting Sam was such a crucial part of me becoming an actual artist, I think, in that sense, where I could show Sam a guitar song that I made one day with a tape player and some loops and stuff, and then I could show him a techno song and he would get it, and he would be like, oh yeah, we have a place for that, or we at least have a place for your creative mind that way. And I think the track record has proven that to be so. You know, if I've released very acoustic sounding songs, I've released techno that could be played in a nightclub, and it's all because of Sam's belief and confidence in my ability to just be free and do what I want to do. So hats off to Sam and Ghostly International as being that's like my house, you know, it's my label. I couldn't see myself ever. Of course, I release on other labels in certain formats, but I would never not release on Ghostly.
It's part of who you are.
100%. And it's not like Sam isn't up for exploring and trying different outlets. That's also what makes it so good.
We love some of the artists that are on Ghostly, but we also really love the merch. I'm actually wearing a Ghostly t-shirt. This is an unofficial collaboration between myself and Ghostly because I bought it from you all and then ice-dyed it.
I like it.
It's funny you mentioned all this, Matthew, because one of the things that I wrote down in preparing for this was something that Sam said about you in 2007. That's actually in this our podcast video. He said, the thing about Matthew as an artist is that he's unafraid to explore anything that's in his brain. And it kind of just reflects what you just said. Like, he was always there for you, not trying to pigeonhole you, saying, hey, you're good at whatever, techno or dance music or whatever. He was like, hey, as an artist, whatever you feel like expressing, I want to be supportive of that.
And I love all the different labels I can release on, Perlon and Berlin, but I would never send them the weirder stuff they send Sam. Yeah. So, and it's so lucky, you know, I'm so lucky to have that. It could be a lot different if I did not meet Sam. I think I would struggle a lot with choices of limiting myself, you know, and not putting out or showing people certain things.
You talked about some of your early musical influences, and how Carl Craig kind of introduced you to more, and that's of course an ongoing journey. I'd love to hear a little bit about your visual influences, because you're a highly visual person as well as a music maker.
Totally, and more so recently. I think I don't know if it's just having, I've had 3 children now. There's a thing with music, you know, where when I'm younger, I'm thinking, okay, you'll never not do this. You're a Bowie, you know, you're like a Lou Reed, like you're a Prince in your mind. You're thinking, okay, this is what you do for the rest of your life. There's no doubt about that. But something's happened where I think just the onslaught of musicians and the ability to make music is so prevalent, and I love that. I think we hear so much music that we would not have heard of had the iPhone not have had such amazing apps, or software had become so prevalent. Now there's software that people use on websites now. You can make music and mix music, and that's great. And I think so many people have access to it now. So something has happened, I think, in that change that maybe made me do a few second guesses, or just maybe lost my total undying unfettered passion to just make music all the time. I still do. I love sitting down in the studio and tinkering with sound and playing with synthesizers, playing with my voice and effects and everything. But releasing music, I think, has kind of become a bit harder for me. And introduce art now, all of a sudden. Definitely during the pandemic, I made a choice. I said, look, I'm going to take this opportunity to finally really learn programs like Adobe After Effects and Premiere. I'm going to learn how to edit. I'm going to learn how to dabble in Illustrator, graphic design, and things that I had been so either afraid to touch or just didn't have the time to touch and try to get it right. But I looked at it like music. When I started making music, you don't know what you're doing. You have an idea of what you want to do, what you want to sound like. But when you're young, it just doesn't matter. You don't give a shit. You shouldn't if you're trying to be a musician. But I didn't have that bravado or that confidence with visual arts because I hadn't chose that route or film or editing. I didn't choose that as an 18-year-old or 16-year-old. So I always thought of it as off limits, So slowly but surely, I think I started with like dad memes and jokes, which is making like the most weird, like cut up Photoshoppy, like app stuff on my phone. But I also started, getting into like OS based stuff, like on the computer. And it just slowly morphed into something. I was like, oh, maybe I can actually show this to Michael Chena, who does my art for Ghostly. And maybe I could show this to Sam and, bless their hearts. And he'd say in the South, they really, gave me my space to grow. I'm sure they saw some things I was showing them, been like, oh, that's cute, Matt. They keep trying. But no, they've been fun to like bounce ideas off of. And yeah, slowly, again, it's a totally different beast, visual arts. It's cool in the sense that I'm never the type of artist to say my stuff is good, music or not, but definitely visual arts, But it has sold a few things, whether it be NFT or actually sold some physical products to some fans early on. That I was doing some actual painting and I posted to Instagram and a couple fans really liked what I was doing and they asked if they could buy it and I was like, okay, like sure. And so we set up a little thing and I shipped it to them and I mean that felt so good that somebody thought it was worth having and I definitely see a big crossover. It's fans of my music want to have something that I did visually and it's a little bonus thing and it's awesome.
Is there a similarity at all in kind of the creative process?
Yes.
Whether you're creating a piece of music or a piece of art in some way?
Absolutely. Especially the digital stuff. The physical stuff, when it was, I definitely went through a phase where I was going to like Blick and like buying like oil paints and pastels and, I was physically invested into making art with absolutely no training. Like, you see a Picasso or any real good artist can draw very abstract, simplistic works, and you're like, oh, that's very pretty simple. But then that they can also draw like a very lifelike, amazing, photorealistic, portrait of somebody. You're like, okay, yeah, they're trained, they know art, they know light, they know shading, they know how to draw something, but they choose to express themselves in different ways. Me, no, I can just like throw random paint on the paint and it's like, okay, that looks kind of cool, but I have absolutely no ability to draw an actual like apple if I needed to. So in that sense, I always knew like there was difference, but I loved it. I loved the process. I loved what it felt like versus music. And that process was just so cathartic and like, it was almost meditative. Like I would just sit there and like, just paint and you get in the zone of just letting out like movement, like through brushstrokes and this like routine action with my hand would become this like meditative thing. And this is like 6 years ago, probably. Like, so this is on my way out of music daily, finding things different to do with my expression, going somewhere mentally. It was very relaxing and it kind of resulted in something that you could see, which was a lot like music, a lot like organic music, where you're just sitting there playing a guitar for a long time and you kind of forget what you're doing or you forget where you are. And I love that about the physical art. I have a saying with that kind of art, for me at least, it worked best when it looked like I wasn't there. Like I wasn't a part of the piece at all. Like there was no human involvement. Because I could tell when I was there. Like if I saw something I painted, I was like, oh, this looks like a human trying to do something with paint on a canvas or whatever. But there's a lot of times where it just looked like, oh, I don't really see me in that. And I was like, oh, that actually works. I don't see a hand. I don't see a brush. I don't see a thing. It just is an image that appeared digitally.
I've been trying to figure out if there's a way to connect fishing to the other work that you do. And I feel like I just heard it, but I'm curious if you would agree that there's something about the meditation and the repetition is grounding, or in fishing is grounding, that maybe you also find in making art or music. It's a stretch, but I'm curious if you find parallels or similarities, or if you go to a similar place when fishing as when making music or making visual art.
Yeah, like, are you composing while you're fishing?
Yeah, you're definitely patient. It's not just that; it's the ability to find peace and solace. Like the ability to just like be relaxed in an environment where you don't know if you're going to catch a fish in a minute or an hour. And a lot of that was under the Texas sun. But it's when the act itself becomes better than the reward. 100% music is like that for me. I've always made music, from the time I can remember deciding to be a musician. My father was also a musician. He was a fisherman, but he was also a musician. So I grew up around guitars and all that, tape recorders and everything. So when I chose to finally say, okay, I want to do some of this too, I've balanced it out to, I'm sure I've made an hour of music every day for my entire life since I was 14 years old, at least. Maybe 20% of that music gets released, like publicly. So yeah, fishing is a lot like that. It's just the act of doing it is way more important than the reward of releasing an album or releasing a song or catching a fish.
On Inhabit, design is personal.
We talk about creating space, but we talk about finding your place.
This is a show about the power of design.
I think that's what people feel when they come here and we speak their language. They go, wow, it's really cool. I'm cool. And our culture is cool.
I'm Dr. Erica Etland.
And I'm Eunice Wong. I'm an urban designer.
And I'm a public health scientist. You do have a voice in how your environment gets built.
Inhabit, a Perkins & Will podcast.
In looking at some of your newer things that you're doing in terms of your art, like, what's your relationship with technology? And how do you use it as a tool to help you express yourself?
You're writing a story, whether it be visual or audio, from left to right. You start to see similarities in the way that you do things. There's timelines. You're using, whether it be keyframes, like they say in video, or modulations or audio modulations, and just shifts in frequency and level and amplitude, or effects, whether it be delay or reverb. They're just different Swiss Army knives. They're kind of doing the same thing. You're affecting a base image or a base sound, and you're manipulating it to tell your story and your version of that story. And I've always said with music, whether you have the classic 909, 808, 303, electronic music, those machines don't necessarily have a soul, but it's the operator's soul that tells them what to do. You're seeing this beauty of a marriage of different sects of art forms and industries come together to make better art, and I love that.
I don't know if you noticed during CES, one of the announcements that was made was that MasterCard was launching an effort to educate and support musicians to create NFT work.
Oh, no, I did not see that. And is it a way for them to make money and sell NFTs on their platform? Probably, but that's fine.
In the future.
But I like that. It's open. I don't think they're trying to scam anybody. They understand that, okay, we can help this process a little bit, and in the end we'll get some sales and maybe make our percentage here and there. But I don't think that's not icky to me. That's not bad. I appreciate that. If government isn't going to be doing it, if there's not going to be socialist programs that are, that used to be out there to help the arts and children learn how to play music and put on puppet shows and all sorts of various things, then maybe it has to be MasterCard or Microsoft. There would be no Mozart or Bach or anybody without the backers. Yeah.
when you make music and when you make visual art? Is there a similarity in the process, in the repetition? And do you listen to music when you're making visual art? And what do you typically listen to? And how does that music influence the visuals that you're making?
I think I choose not to. I think my brain only has the ability to do or process so much. And I don't know if I'd just be worried that, I would be internalizing or interpreting some of the music I was hearing into the piece that I was working on. But I've always chosen not to have too much going on. But I will say, like recently, I plugged in, I got a new Mac computer, one of the Mac Studios. I got it specifically because I wanted to start doing more visually and not just, audio, but I love combining the two. That's the marriage of the audio and the visual at the same time. That's part 3. It's like, that's a whole nother option, which doesn't always necessarily have to be there, but it is something I've worked on. But when I work on a visual piece, there is that kind of ruminating and just tweaking and just here and there. Like, I love blending and layers and layers upon layers of color and filters and just different effects. And I like to just tweak, and I can tweak for hours, just like I do loops with audio, where I can just sit there and just go way too far with one sound or one 15-second loop, and it never amasses into a song. And I can do that with art now, and I do it sometimes, where it's just like, this hue, this shade works a little bit better with this shade, and then all of a sudden the way that I sit and play with sound is very similar to the way that I sit and play with color and visual. It's a lot of layering. It's kind of making it sound like you're not there. Like I said, like taking the human part out of it. And I've always had a love-hate relationship with presets and things that are out of the box, whether it be visual, like, hey, here's a sampler reel that you can use for, After Effects, or a sampler effect. And that the true heads and the real designers are going to see that and be like, oh, that's effect number 407 or whatever. And that's how it is with music, like a real down in the ditches music producer can be like, oh yeah, that's Valhalla's reverb effect number, like whatever, from their preset pattern. And I think that the goal of being a good artist is not only using those to your advantage, but figuring out how to make it sound like it's not that. And I remember talking to somebody who ran drummer for Franz Ferdinand when we were out on tour. She was doing a tutorial school online in Scotland where she lives. But she said there was a young student who had a patch of 10 of the same effects on the sound. And she was like, well, but why do you have the same delay like 10 times? And the kid was just like, well, I like the way it sounded, And like, I would never think to do that, but that is it. That's the art of it, is taking a program like Ableton and an effect that everyone else who uses Ableton has, but finding a way to make it yours and make it totally yours. And I think that's what I try to do with music and art. Taking the programs, the mundane, the things that come with the computer out of the box, whether it be my first computer in 1994, I had Sound Blaster Pro on it, and I was manipulating it to like mix different, soundtrack cuts and stuff, and just making like audio edits for the first time. Jump to now, where you have Logic and built-in synthesizers and built-in effects, and just kind of like, how can I tweak those? How can I learn it better? And how can I modulate it? And how can I dive deeper into the program to make it sound different than it came? Side note, there's a big problem there too. You can get way too caught up in it, and that's when you can sit and work on a loop or a piece for way too long. So that's the balance, is like, how do I manipulate it just enough without it becoming detrimental to my process as an artist. You have to learn how to limit yourself and put these restrictions on and
take a step away from it.
Totally. So yeah.
So this question is probably counter to everything that you just said, but I really want to know
what you think anyway, which is you've made music for a really long time. You're making visual art more recently. These are separate practices for you at the moment. Can you imagine combining them? Can you imagine composing visuals and music simultaneously? Is that exciting to you? Is that daunting?
It seems like a no-brainer. I think technology is actually going in that direction. One example, very, very tactile example, is Fruity Loops. FL Studio, it used to be called Fruity Loops, by ImageLine software. Now has this little patcher that I've recently discovered, one of the more recent updates, called the video game editor. And a lot of the presets are kind of like, this song is by so-and-so, artist name, track name. And it's just really kind of cool built-in visuals that can be synced to audio. So they expect you now, as you're making your song, like, hey, why don't you put a visual out with it? Whether you're going to put it on YouTube or your Instagram page, here's a tool set now that you can kind of be your own visual graphic designer. And they're pretty cool looking. Like for presets, as far as presets go, they're pretty like, wow, that's like really polished and shiny and looks like really cool 3D rendering and stuff. And I thought to myself, wow, like this is definitely the way of the future, because a lot of the young people now expect that. You don't just put out a song, you put out a teaser, you put out the visual element. And I think I do a class at U of M at University of Michigan on the recording industry, and I've done it for about 6 years now. And it's basically about how to put out music in the digital age. It's a mini course. It's a 1-credit course I do for about 8 weeks. And I'm talking to kids a lot about that exact experience. It's like, how do you make a mark, or how do you get recognized in this day and age? And how do you release music and be seen? And it is that you need to be an editor, you need to be a manager, you need to be a graphic designer, you need to be a writer, copywriter for your own kind of press release, on top of being a musician. So you're going to see a lot more of this crossover of musicians needing to make a splash visually. That being said, there are people like Max Cooper and the Raster Noten label who have been doing a marriage of visual and audio for a very long time. And they're very, very good at it. And do they sit there and make a visual thing at the same time as the audio thing? No, not really. I don't think they're doing that yet. But I do think we're going to see a lot more of that. So yeah, I think there's going to be a blend of the VJ and the DJ, for lack of a better, two letter.
What about the AIJ?
The AIJ is there. There's actually DJ software, the app. It's DEE, I think J, that I've learned recently, because this is the other thing. Okay, I'm getting very lazy and I'm looking for things that do a lot of stuff for me. And promo mixes and DJ mixes have always been a bit of a thorn in my side, because look, I love DJing, but I like DJing in a room for 50 people to 5,000 people. Like, I like the experience of us dancing to music together and feeling something. But if somebody wants a mix from me, it's like literally the hardest thing for me to do is sit down and make a DJ mix at home. So I was looking and I found this app now that basically has auto mix features. Mm-hmm. So I can put in the songs and just like push play, and like, because what's it going to do? It's going to fade it in and out like I do.
Is that going to become more prevalent, you think?
I think so. I mean, obviously that's what everybody's saying. We talk about Web3 and what's happening with NFT and AI. I've been on DALL-E 2 for a while, and just started finally figuring out how to use Midjourney. And I love the weirdness of it. I love the mistakes. I love the arguments about it taking away jobs from real artists. I love all that. It's all part of it. No one person is right. It's not all going to be one way or not. It's all going to be a mix of everything, like it always is. But there is such a fascinating space now with the visual element. And there's no doubt that music is next. Ambient music, of course, is being kind of propped up as the first thing to get done by AI. And it's tricky. I kind of had a little diatribe. I've got some friends that are also in that world of the tech side, the actual writing of the programs. And I was thinking, why do we have a tool? Like, why are we allowed to use all this stuff? Like, why are we creators being given Chat GPT, or why are we being given access to this? Because we're the testers. Like, we're the ones, we're using it so they can learn it. Like the coders and the software, like OpenAI wants us, they need us to use this stuff to be able to figure out what they want to do with it. And whether that's going to be to teach cars how to drive or, automate services for other things later, I don't know. I don't know what the process is all about, but I know that they're using us to test this software. They don't care if we come up with fake Mona Lisas, and that's not what it's about. It's not, the end goal isn't for us to create art. I think we're the middlemen for whatever this stuff is going to eventually do and accomplish.
I mean, we talk about this a lot, especially lately, and especially just coming out of CES. Just a lot of talk about this, and then people are like, well, you're out of a job because AI is going to write better stories than you can. And Josh and I laughed. We're like, well, faster than we can,
yeah.
Sure. But I still am a really big believer, and I think you've touched on this in a few different times in this conversation about tools are great, technology is great, but the art comes from within, and it has to be kind of conducted, if you will, or managed or driven by the human, by the person.
Mm-hmm.
And tools are there to support that process, enhance that process. And I think about that the same with us. Like, maybe there is technology someday that's going to write better stories, but they don't have the context, right? The AI is only as good as the data that goes into it.
And it's pulling from things that already exist. It's not having these thoughts on its own, thoughts, quote unquote. It needs the Google search image base to make something that it sees. So, not to interrupt, but my theory was, or thinking was, well, you're not a good enough artist if this stuff takes your job, because it's basically taking things that artists have already done and just kind of putting it together and making a new piece of art. The real artists are doing something that this computer system has no access to.
You need the context, you need the ability to think critically about it and how things come together and pull it together based on other experiences that you have and other inputs that you have. In a lot of ways, it's the role of the editor, right?
Yeah. I wish all that stuff was around when I was in school. I've been releasing music since 1999, produced music for myself, but I've made collaborative efforts and projects with big companies like GE and Ford, Microsoft. I've become this kind of corporate remixer of sorts as well. And lately I'm dabbling a bit more in visual arts.
Matthew just showed us a piece of work that he's going to talk about, which looks like it's probably 60 inches square.
Yeah, 48 by 48. And that's the sample. It's the first thing I've ever printed, I guess, basically. And I chose that one. That's also an NFT.
So physical representation of a digital work that you made.
That is the product of the generosity and support of a group of people at Spotlight in Detroit.
One of our favorite places in Detroit.
Which I love to hear that when you said you know of Spotlight.
Spotlight is this great multi-use space here in Detroit. It's in kind of a very industrial neighborhood where you probably wouldn't expect some kind of, I want to call it a club, but it's more than a club. There's kind of a bodega that we were talking about before. There's a record shop. It's a bar, and it's a multi-use kind of music venue, dance venue. It's something we'd love to check out while we're in town.
Totally. So they have another element to it that is completely about producing art and making things for all sorts of artists. And they're starting to do just completely, they do skateboards for people. They do cause style toys. They do prints. They do all the stuff that ends up on the walls at Spotlight when it's a gallery space. They're making everything as well. And Jesse and Rula from there have been so supportive. I went for a night just to hang out, and I showed Rula some of the art I was working on. And she said, well, how about we do a show for you? I was like, what? Like, she's like, yeah, like, this is amazing. We have an opening in like a few months. We'll do a show. I'm going to do an opening party, which kind of goes back to some of the questions about have I done, music and art simultaneously. And that is going to be, I want to do a live performance of more ambient music, modular sounds, using my synths, but also creating some color stuff live, kind of in unison with the sound, as well as maybe using some of the images for NFT. This one in particular, just to talk about specifics, this one was an NFT that I put up on Foundation recently, and I needed to produce a sample with everybody, with Arula and Jesse, and I chose that one just because I recently made it, and it was so bold, and it's primary colors, it's very intense, and I was like, okay, if this looks good on print, this is aluminum, so if this looks good on there, then I know that the other stuff will look good too. So it's really more about just the test of the color and the properties of it to see if that works, more so than the actual image.
How is it painted?
It's done at a factory that I guess just sprays really high intensity spray painting on it. But I was so impressed with it, just like the vividness of it, and it really worked. Jesse suggested this format. It's like, no, I think aluminum's gonna look great for this stuff. But you can also print onto paper and all that and get different effects. The thing about like the center, for example, I've learned with these like reds and blues on computer screens, whether it be iPhone or a MacBook or whatever, you get an effect that happens with the LCD crystals, in the screen itself. You'll get this blurriness that happens between reds and blues, and it kind of turns into this eye trickery, and your eye starts to kind of like bounce, and you'll get movement in a still image. So a lot of my NFTs I call them moving stills, and I also wanted to see if that would happen in real life, and it kind of does in a weird way. Under the right lighting conditions, you can look at this and you'll get the same eye jitters, which is really cool, because I want to do a lot more of that on print. Bonus is that we're talking about expanding upon the idea and not just doing the gallery show, but actually starting like an art house of sorts, like a Matthew Deere art house.
It's the natural extension of where you're at.
I think so. And for me, it's always just been necessity. Is it necessary? I don't like the idea of making stuff that doesn't need to be made. But I found through NFT and through art, like I said, people that buy it are fans of mine. And I make more friends and connections this way as well. So I look at it like that, it's a better way to meet people and do more and inspire me. I need new options, and that's what it's giving me.
Thank you for that perfect setup, Matthew, because one of the things that needed to be made was music for our podcast series.
Yes.
And when Josh and I were talking about all the creative different components of what we needed to do, the brief was a little bit loose.
I love that.
And it was like, hey, we need music for the podcast.
I love it.
But doing something explicitly for podcasts is maybe different for you, but certainly you've composed many, many things for all kinds of uses before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think it's very playful. So I did something very me, which is just basically thinking about you guys and thinking about what you do and listening to some of the stuff you sent me already, and just having all that just in my head, and then just sitting down multiple nights and starting and stopping and erasing and restarting, and deleting, redoing. And then when something finally sticks because I'm a huge podcast listener as well, so I would like to think that I have an idea of what it could be and couldn't be. I had recently watched a little documentary about the tones of the original radio and TV programs, like NBC and CBS, and how they had those do like that stuff.
The chimes,
and it was all about where the chime came from and how they needed them as like a sign off for like the midnight hour or something. They needed to be able to show I think it was the broadcast tower needed to be able to talk to the host of the show. Like there was this weird, like they needed a code to like let each other know that, okay, I hear you and you hear me, and we're going to go into this like off hour like thing. And so that's where it came from, but then it stuck and it became like, we still have, I don't know if it's NBC's, like the Peacock one, that still exists, and it doesn't serve the same purpose that it used to. Anyways, when you guys said you wanted something, you're like, take a listen to what we have and let us know if you hear anything else happening. And I just listened to that. And I said, okay, they need a 3-tone, sound. And I went back and I did that now. So there is at the beginning the cool hunting 3-tone chime of sorts. It's buried in a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
But it is there. And I think it does sets a better tone for because it's like when you listen to podcasts, whether it be energetic or one of the suspense ones, one of like the mystery, crime mystery, whether it's Radio Lab. I think the sound is a big part of it, that whether it be music or the atmosphere of the sound effects, you recognize it right away. You're like, oh yeah, now I'm listening to New York Times.
We're embarking on our next 20 years, right? We have to have a nod to the past. We're inspired by the past, but it's really all about the future.
I'm happy to be part of that.
Matthew, I've had so much fun. You mentioned that you're doing all kinds of different things. How can our listeners find you?
First and foremost, I would say go to ghostlyinternational.com/artists and just find my name there and click on me. Ghostly, like I said, is my home base, and you can really kind of get a glimpse of everything I've done.
You also have a studio.
Yes, MatthewDeerSounds.com is also a way you can get me for more commercial style projects, whether it be simple sound design or commercial design. I love to work on that as well. Instagram, of course, Matthew Deer.
Easy enough.
But yeah, you can see like I post my unboxing of this monstrous piece behind us from Spotlight. I post digital things I'm working on. I post new sounds that I'm doing in the studio. I love to just leak like full songs that I just made because I could, and just say, hey, here's a brand new song I just made.
You mentioned that a lot of your NFT work is on Foundation.
Foundation is my home for NFTs. So you can go there. I did do one music NFT, like I talked about earlier. That's on Catalog Works. That was with Ghostly as a partnership. You can get a few of my things unreleased on Ghostly that came out on Bandcamp only. During the pandemic, I released 3 kind of silent albums or sleeper albums that included a lot of stuff that hadn't come out. So that's a little known fact. You can go there for some rarities and B-sides.
And of course, just about any music platform.
Any streaming platform.
It's been so great reconnecting with you in person. We've been spending a lot of time working together remotely as we develop the sound, or you developed the sound for us for our podcast. But to be here today has been really great. And we're really grateful for your friendship and for your incredible work.
Awesome. I really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Josh, before we go to credits, I've been thinking about something for this episode. We recorded it originally a few months ago, and when we were editing it, I felt that there were 2 things that we really needed to revisit. One of those things is about the merchandise that Ghostly makes, because I know it's something that you're really fond of and you wear, honestly, almost every day. And the second thing was I wanted to give the chance for our listeners to hear the whole song that Matthew composed, because we don't ever play it as a whole song. We usually just chop it up and use little bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, the Ghostly merch, I touched on it a little bit in the episode, and I'm glad that we're back to dig in further because, yeah, Evan, I do, I guess, wear the socks pretty often and maybe a few different t-shirts quite often as well. Matthew, we talked about your music. We talked about your visual art. We talked about the story of Ghostly. And one of the things that I've always loved about the brand is all the merch. Beyond hats and socks and t-shirts, there's headphones and watches and bags and lots of stuff, water bottles. And sometimes that merch is made in collaboration with different artists who are kind of reinterpreting the ghost. And other times it's using the standard Ghostly mark. Is the merch side of Ghostly something that you get into?
As a user, as a fan, 100%. Aside from, my album artwork and my physical releases being available on the site, I have not contributed much to the merch side.
But now that you're making more visual art, can I have a Matthew Deer t-shirt is really all I'm getting at.
Thank you for getting direct with it.
Can we pitch this to Sam if that's not already happening?
I would love to sell you a Matthew. I want to make you a Matthew Deer t-shirt. I've been watching like some funny YouTube stuff, and I won't credit anybody in particular, but there's a lot of wild YouTube stuff out there. Like my 5-year-old son, and I have been watching this one group of Australian guys who have a giant hammer, and I'm talking like the size of like maybe 2 school buses, like high, like a carnival ride size hammer. And they just did some merch where they had 4-gallon buckets of like fluorescent paint, and they hit it with the hammer, and surrounding it was all these like hooded sweatshirts, like blanks, and they were like spraying their merch with paint fresh. And that's what I have to do for you. I'll probably get like a small, like maybe a quart of paint and maybe just a regular mallet, and I can do some Gallagher style smashing. And we'll see what we can get going. But no, I would love to make some really custom. I've been talking about it.
Maybe there's a collab. Maybe Matthew, you do part of it, and then Josh does ice dyeing on top of it or something.
Yeah, and I realized as I explained this whole process, I shot myself. There's no way Sam would ever do this. So this will have to be a one-off direct. But no, I honestly, like, when things come out, like I go right on there and I order them like everybody else. And sometimes they're sold out right away. I'm like, shoot, I missed that one too.
It's a lot of it sells out real fast.
You got to act quick. Even me, I have to act quick. And there are some amazing collaborations. And some of the art I've been doing, was definitely inspired by Sam's history of art and his use of art in the label, and just bringing me with people like Michael Cina and Will Calcutt and the people that I've worked with over the years on my album art. I've learned so much and been able to watch that process and see how it clicks.
Nice. Well, thank you for indulging my merch fanboy pursuits.
Of course. Well, let's trade. You give me some Jen Stark socks, and I can probably send you some Ghostly socks.
Yes, easy. Jen would love for you to have her socks.
I'm feeling some collabs happening.
Maybe I could do some music for her, one of her pieces or something.
Oh, I love that idea. I want to talk a little bit more about the soundtrack. Our listeners have heard it over different episodes and the way that it's used. But I just love it. And we worked hard on it. You worked really hard on it. And we felt it'd be really nice to play the whole song. So we're going to do that for you after the credits. Matthew, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so listening back, to the song, I think I want it to be playful. I want it to be energetic. It's an interesting thing. It's a tricky slope. It's like when I open up for Depeche Mode, you realize you're just there to like be a small, brief moment before somebody sees their favorite band or whatever. So the people coming to listen to the podcast, they want to hear you guys talk to people. So it's a little bit of that. Like you kind of want to just be a quick like bump set spike kind of thing. Like I don't want to take up too much mental space, but I want the mental space that I've taken with the sound and with the music to be inviting and engaging and warm and playful, which I think is what I've gleaned over the years from Cool Hunting. So I was trying to just let all that in that I know about you guys and know about the brand and just our history together. But at the same time, it's like I'm me, so there's a lot that I just want to do naturally when I go to a computer or a synthesizer. And luckily, I think you guys kind of like that.
Like most things we do, they're really personal. So having people on the show that we know and have history with in some way has been really important for us. And the music for the podcast we felt had to be similar. And we're really happy that we were able to work on it together. So everyone can listen to it if you hang out for the credits. Right after that, we'll play the whole soundtrack. Thank you for listening to this episode of Design Tangents with Cool Hunting. Make sure you hit the follow button wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode.
Design Tangents is proud to be part of the Surround Podcast Network. You can check out many other amazing design and architecture-related podcasts at surroundpodcasts.com. That's podcasts with an S.
We're psyched to partner with The Studio by SANDOW to make our show possible. Huge thank you to our production team, Samantha Sager, Rob Schulte, Hannah Vitti, and Wise Grisette.
And thank you to Genesis for presenting this debut season.
Our theme music is by the amazing Matthew Deere.
Stay tuned for the next episode of Design Tangents and learn more about us at coolhunting.com.